The faster you can learn what your particular gift is, the faster you can run to wherever it is you should be. I didn't understand what my gift was, and my sweet spot is creating within structure. That's how I am an artist. I am an artist that can come up with something and then tether it very quickly. Other people have other gifts. I am always jealous of the people who are like, I've always known I've wanted to be a musician. And I'm like, gosh, I've always wanted to have that clarity. I just don't. And so I think it's okay to not have that clarity. So I think the faster you can hone in on that, the better your life will be, because then you'll really be able to say, no, that's not for me. Like, no, insurance is not for me. Yes, I can tell that I'm getting something from working at Outback Steakhouse and being around other people. That's a light bulb for me, right? So the more you can collect those light bulbs, the better.
And welcome back to the Badass Women in Business podcast. Today, we have Thayer Lavielle. Thayer, thank you so much for being on the show. And as usual, tell us your story.
Well, thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener. And today I work at Wasserman and I lead our women's group called The Collective, which we started about 6 years ago. And we can get into that. But the story, let's see, where did I start? I started as the youngest of four. I have three older brothers. And then my parents got separated and divorced, and I got two more brothers. And I say that because they were so formative in like my spirit of competitiveness and my ability to stick my elbows out. And really when I first came into the sports industry and people were like, oh, it's so hard being the only woman in the room. I'm like, I've always been the only woman in the room. I've always been the only girl in the room, at least. So, they taught me this kind of story of resilience. I think it was also probably being just Gen X. You grew up with a very different parenting set. And I laugh now and joke with my kids that, they literally had ads that said, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your kids are? Because what? Like now as a parent, I think to myself, do we need a public service announcement to have people remind us to check on our children? Apparently we did back then. So those days were formative in that it really helped me to learn resilience and learn how to stand up to and for myself, but also measure up to a kind of societal bar that was set by men and boys, competitively, athletically, societally, culturally. I was never allowed to it wasn't because my parents said this, but my brothers, if I had anything kind of precious, doll-like, stuffed animal-like, those were not, they did not last long unless I hid them. They were like my secret little treasures because my brothers were like, this is a boys' club, basically. And so as I went out into the world, I was raised by a mom who was quite fearless and a dad who was quite doting. And he's an incredible father who was a middle school principal and teacher for a long time. And so he was kind of the rudder for us in many, many ways. And that set me certainly into a trajectory of understanding that I can do anything that I want for, as long as I want to do it. And my mom would say that to me. She would say, you can do anything you want. You can do anything you want. You can be anything that you want. Even as a really young girl in 1978, she would say that to me as she was kind of breaking out of her own norms and doing a radio. She was a newscaster on the radio and stuff like that. So I just didn't ever kind of go into my working life fearful of that, fearful of not having a place at the table. That being said, I played a lot of sports just to kind of keep up. It was the currency in the house and was pretty athletic and played field hockey and lacrosse all through kind of, middle school, high school, college, ended up playing ice hockey in college as well. And, the fun part is that I majored in, I went to Colgate University in upstate New York and I majored in French and religion, which is both really interesting things to major in and leaves you scratching your head as to what you want to do when you grow up. But it was actually a great way to understand the history of the world and a great way to see the world through different eyes. And immediately after school, I went to France because I'm also not terribly religious. And so it was more like a course of history through philosophy and religion. And as I went to France after college, I I already had studied French for a long time. And so I really understood the basics of the language. I'd spent some time over there as like an exchange student for some summers and stuff like that. And in college, I spent a semester in Dijon. And then when I went over to France, I had no job. I had worked double jobs for like 6 months when I got home to basically save up as much money as I could to be able to go live in France for as long as I possibly could. And I did that. And I worked, coming out of college, I worked 2 jobs. I worked as a server at Outback Steakhouse, which was so fun as a 22-year-old to be, just serving steaks and blooming onions. But my day job was working for a good friend of my mom's who ran a life insurance agency. And that was like death by 1,000 paper cuts and awful. It was so quiet. You would hear like people's corduroys swish as they walked by. And what I really learned though is like, this is a job that I don't ever want. And I don't know who does, but thank God for them. I knew that it was not the job because they were underwriting people's life insurance. And a lot of these people were difficult to insure because they had all sorts of issues. The only ones that I actually were interested in were the celebrities. I was like, so wait, that guy, wow, I didn't know that he drank so much. Or that lady, oh, wow, who knew that they had, And so I knew that like just the underwriting business was not for me because I was far more interested in people's, kind of the star power of it versus the actual underlying necessity to have insurance. So I saved up enough money, went to France, didn't have a job. My mom, as I'd mentioned, was in the radio business my whole life. So because I had graduated with an incredible double major of French and religion, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And so I just started knocking on ABC News's bureau chief door and was like, hi, I would like to come and work with you and like offer my services. And they were like, no, thank you. And I'd say, okay, great. So I'll come back tomorrow then. And then I'd come back and they'd be like, still no. And eventually they were like, come back actually next Wednesday or come back. Eventually they kind of let me in and they allowed me to do things. I was not paid at all. I was so happy to have a place to go every day and to be of service in some way, to feel like purposeful in my day. And I would log videotape for hours on end in they literally put me in a dark closet. They were like, just log these videotapes. But I did. And then I'd see the world and history of some of these incredible European events through the lens of these cameramen who were so fearless, who worked for the bureau. And then I'd walk out and I'd meet these 2 cameramen right there. They would be right there. And I'd be like, wow, I just watched you at this assassination attempt and you were crawling towards them when everybody else was running away. And that's incredible. So I had this really unique experience of being able to witness history very up close and personally and quite jarringly through like non-edited eyes, right? So eventually they ended up needing me to do something like to get, I had to be paid to go help for the 50th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy. And long story short, the entire news desk from New York came over. I was just a little 22-year-old eager beaver, like, let me, and I spoke fluent French. So let me go get the passes and figure out the things and be of service, go team. And eventually the guys at New York were like, just come back to New York, we'll hire you. And I was like, oh, okay. So my séjour in France was over because I wanted to get on with it. I had met my husband there. We were not yet married. And so I said to him, like, I'm out. I'm going back to New York. Come if you want, don't if you don't, peace. And he was like, I'll come. So we went and I worked for ABC for about 5 years. I worked at World News Tonight with Peter Jennings for a couple years. And then I got moved to work at Good Morning America, where I worked first at the overnight desk, which was an incredible job. Actually, it sounds awful in the hours. I loved it so much because you were able to come in at 6 o'clock at night when everybody who was working dayside was going home, just absolutely kind of beaten up by the politics of it all and the craziness of the day's news. And we barely had 24-hour news. I think like CNN was the only 24-hour news channel. And I would come in and this show would be more or less set and they would say, well, I need you to book this segment or follow through on this or like only call us if the world blows up, basically. And for most nights it was pretty calm and, you go back and forth and you'd pass everything back off at 5 a.m. when everybody would come in and to do the show. But some nights you'd have like, planes exploding or cult deaths or like some of the most fantastical stories to be on, which was, I can make light of them, but they were tragedies. I make light of them because from an experience of working in the news business, it's almost farcical, the things that you have to do to go get these guests on the show. And so you'd have to like run around and bring brownies to people before the Today Show. Right. So eventually I did not love that. I did not feel good about some of the things that I'd have to go try to convince people to do because of the level of tragedy in their lives. And that job of being a booker or being a producer on those morning shows is very challenging. And so I don't ever want to make light of it. And it's also in the face of these really awful events usually. So from there, I got into PR at a small agency in New York City, where I learned, as I like to say, I really learned how to storytell in PR, because you have to start to connect dots between things to create stories, and they have to be factually true, and they have to feel like they hold water and that people will believe you. And it was really the first time I understood how to sell. Like, oh, if I take this, this, and this, then I can sell it. And that was such a great job because I understood being in client service. My client was Tag Heuer at the time, and they were and are, I'm sure, an incredible brand, but demanding. They had very specific things that they wanted out of their PR agency. And so I was, having to figure that out very quickly. So I learned how to hustle. I learned how to tell stories. I learned how to work relationships in the press. I learned how to manage expectations, like all of those things I learned in this job. And then from there, I went in-house at L'Oreal, where I worked for about 7 years. I came in as a PR person. And the thing is that my experience in news and my experience in PR taught me how to have ideas. What if we did this? What if we could do that? Blah, blah, blah. And so as the PR person in this corporate job and I was handed these to do the, communications for these really old, clunky European brands. So, and clunky, I say that because at the time there was brands that were far more sexy and new. So there was like Giorgio Armani was just like a thing. And they were coming out with makeup, which is a big thing. And then I had like Paloma Picasso, these kind of heavier, older brands. But there was these 4 little brands. It was like Cacharel, Paloma, Lanvin, and I forget what the other one was. And I just did what I did in the PR agency. I just churned out press hits. I figured out how to tell stories, and I got press. And my boss loved me. He just was like, yes, do that. I'd put him on CNBC and do all these things. And eventually he came to me and he said, I'm moving your marketing counterpart over to this other stuff, and I want you to take his job. And I was like, why? That was literally what came out of my mouth. I was like, why? That looks like a lot of math. It looks like a lot of like number crunching and notebooks filled with forecasts, and I don't understand it. And no, thank you. And he was, to his credit, he was one of the most formative people in my career. And I think for a lot of us, he was one of the most formative people in all of our careers, one of the best leaders. And he basically was like, I can teach you the business. You're smart enough to understand that. What I can't teach somebody else is how to have ideas. And I was like, oh, okay. So what I have, that's like a gift. I didn't realize that was a gift. I can't turn that off. That just happens. And that's my way of being creative. So he was really able to help me understand, literally what a P&L is. How do you calculate these percentages? What does my cost of goods even mean? What does it mean when my shaving cream doesn't pass QA? How does it affect my sales? What does that entire value chain look like if I'm creating a product and that's late? And then what does that do down the line to the retailer or the merchant that's counted on that and already run an ad, right? And what's the difference between this region and that region? So we did this partnership with Dale Earnhardt Jr. I had this idea to do something around Drakkar Noir, which was an old men's fragrance. And that was our other one. And it was a big brand in the 80s. And so I was like, we can play off of the fact that it was coming up on its 20th anniversary, and it was a huge brand in the 80s. And there's this nostalgia play, and it's a delicious scent. And let's go do something around a young guy wearing Drakkar. And so we picked Dale Earnhardt Jr. at the time, was very young. And he was, 20 or something, 21. And it was a huge success. We had massive success. And it was, obviously a huge team effort between the creative team and the sales team and all that. And so it was great for Dale, and it was great for the brand and all that, and great for my, ambition. And So Dale had said, you should really come down and work for me and my sister. And I was like, absolutely not. I live in New York City. I'm not moving to North Carolina. There's no. Well, who would do that? Because in my mind, that was like not fathomable to go live in North Carolina. And so we stayed in touch, and I had gotten moved, then promoted to go run all of Lancome's promotional marketing. And I was completely over my skis. I'd never been in a job like this before where I was just out of my depth. I had been told that I would have somebody above me. That person never really materialized. I had a very challenging boss. I found out the fourth day on the job that I was pregnant with my first child. So it was, basically swimming through fatigue the first, several months. I didn't understand what was I didn't really understand the business. Going from one gift with purchase or 3 gift with purchases a year on a men's brand to all of a sudden running Lancome's $400 million business or whatever it was at the time was quite a stair step. And so I had to get smart quickly and to understand that like the lipstick shade they're wearing in Maine is going to be different than Alabama. And how do you need to analyze all of that? And how do you actually, think about that? How do you sell that in? How do you understand what, get little gift bags are on trend? Like there were so many components to it. And I, thank goodness, had such an incredibly seasoned team who were smarter than me, better than me. And yet I also brought things to them that we ultimately made it a great situation between us. And so I did that for 3.5 years. I had another son on their dime, I would say. And it was a very different place than it was in the fragrance division. And so I didn't want to be transferred to Dubai to run a market. I just wasn't that into, again, going back to growing up with a lot of brothers. I was a bit of a tomboy. And so that wasn't like my jam. So I had kept in touch with Kelly and Dale Jr. Kelly is his sister, and I said, okay, we're ready. And then they said, amazing, come down. So we moved down to Charlotte, where I worked for them for about 4 years. And really it was an exciting time because he was just moving from his dad's team at DEI to Mr. Hendrick's team. And there was a whole transition within that from his brand perspective. There was all sorts of things that we could go build. We could go build, which we did, a bar restaurant, which now has different franchises in different places, which is crazy to see. There's one even in the Raleigh airport where I'm like, that's so funny. We made that logo. We designed that thing. So that's very cool to see that lasting, fingerprint of stuff. And then, I was able to work on just kind of, we did a TV show and we did, so I didn't know how to do any of the things that we were doing. I didn't know how to open a bar. I didn't know how to do a time buy and produce a TV show like on our own. And how do you go sell that? And who do you even negotiate with? And, how do you start a fan club and what kind of fan events would work? And so it was a lot of like testing and learning, and super grateful to Kelly and Dale because they were just, yes, let's go, like keep running harder. And they would give great feedback, and they were just really fun to work with. And then eventually I left, and I had met Wasserman through that relationship. I had negotiated across the table with them on a deal with Nationwide, and met my counterpart who's still here also. And that was 14 years ago, and moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, where we love it. I had my daughter in Charlotte, and so we have 3 kids, and we've lived here for 14 years. And I have worked in what would ostensibly be called our consulting business, which is where I came up really working on accounts and running accounts, and going from NASCAR to understanding, golf, tennis, and basketball with Amex, and then getting into a role where I oversaw more accounts. So then it was like, oh, you also need to know football and rugby and all these other things. And then moving into a corporate role where it was really looking at global business development for the entire company at the time, opening our office in China, and then sat in the talent division where I was the COO of several of our divisions, and able to kind of manage and grow some of those and hire a proper salesperson to come in and manage the growth of that team, which was such a great move because he's amazing and the team has grown significantly. And it was there really that there was a bunch of us that thought, how do we do more as an agency for women within the industry of sport? We were just a sports agency at the time. And for women who are athletes and fans and consumers. And so it really came from this place of like, if we're 40 at the time, if we were 48% of the fan base, right, general US market sports fan base, and we're driving 85% of household spend, why are we all being marketed to the same way, including my dad, my son, my husband, my brother? Like, why? Surely we can be smarter than this. And that started to bridge a lot of questions. And we started to ask ourselves questions we couldn't answer. We couldn't find the answers to them. And so we were like, well, we need to go find the answers to this. Who else is in the business? What other women's organizations are there? What movements are happening? Who are the voices for women that are out there? What's the good work they were doing? Can we reach out to them and learn from them and understand them? So we really tried to come at this quite humbly, not saying, hey, aren't you glad we're here? But rather, hey, we just want to figure out how we can participate in helping to advance the power of women. What can we learn from you? And can we do stuff together? And little by little by little, fast forward 6 years, it's very clear that our mission and reason for being is to create this business rationale to invest in women. And I don't mean just like venture capital. I'm talking about how can a brand sponsor an athlete or sponsor a team, or how can you go get tickets, or how can we just make sure that we're buying, a jersey of somebody. So it's really about, is it that they need a strategy? Is it that they need research? Is it that they need a tool? Is it like, what is it from a business to business perspective that you need to invest as a business leader in women? And then let us help you go do that. And so we started a think tank that helps uncover a lot of research and questions, which has been incredible. It's global now. From our advocacy piece of going out into the market and providing research and insights, we then have, a lot of clients that have come to us and said, can we pay you to provide these tools and services? Yes, you can, but the money goes actually back to the business. So it goes back to that kind of consulting side of the business. So we just sit here as really an advocacy tool and as a way to be able to promote change through our clients. It's a successful business that we've been able to scale globally, and one that I'm incredibly proud of because we've figured out how to make way broader change by just creating a model that really helps us to continue to advocate for women and for their worthiness and their purpose, and know that there's something for everybody, and there's somebody for everybody in the case of supporting women. And so it's been a total journey. So now my husband and I, my French husband, who I married, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina with our 3 kids. And here we are today.
That's a fascinating journey.
Yeah, very circuitous.
Yes. I absolutely love the piece on your mom, that she just empowered you, especially in a male-dominated household. There's something to be said about that. And I'm not trying to use ageism, but I think women back then didn't have that as much. So you are so fortunate to have someone that modeled that and championed it for you as well.
But do you know what else was cool, Christy, to that? Is that she had 4 kids by the time she was like 25 or 26. Okay, so I was her baby. We lived in Providence, Rhode Island. She decided that she wanted to go back to college. Mother of 4. So she's like, I'm going to just go to Brown, as one does.
Just Brown.
So she goes back to Brown, gets into Brown with 4 kids, might I add. I was maybe 4. So my oldest brother was maybe 9. And she decides she wants to go try out for the lacrosse team. She's 30 at this point. Okay. She tries out for the lacrosse team, becomes all New England.
Whoa.
Like she's amazing. Yeah. My mom is wildly fearless about just being like, well, why not? And so I just kind of have that sense about it. Like, well, why not? To our initial question, like, what's holding you back, right? If you already knew it could be done, why stop? So
what do you think allowed your mom to have that perspective?
She came from a really big family herself. She was the baby, second to baby of 6.
Mm.
And so I think she too was raised, I think these were different generations where your parents were very hands off, and it was like, I don't know, like, let's just go do it because who's going to stop me? It wasn't like she was stepping out on anybody. It wasn't like she was misbehaving. She just was trying something that was a little bit out of the norm. And so she thought, well, okay, so what if we just normalize it?
Mm,
Yeah.
man.
Like some of my core memories are like standing around a lacrosse team, like a lacrosse field, sorry, with my next oldest brother. And I had like a little sawed off lacrosse stick. And we would probably, I just remember like kind of being around the bench a lot. Crazy.
It's really interesting. You have had this like full circle in your life.
Yeah.
Now you are going out and championing for women in sports. Based on your perspective, like why do you feel like it is so important that we do focus on and champion women in sports?
I mean, there's a lot of research that will say, sports will build confidence, will build teamwork, will build leadership, will build all of these things, which I 100% agree with all of those benefits, aside from the fact that it just makes you feel good. And even if you kind of aren't great at it, like who cares? You're part of a team and you're having fun, and everybody's got their role. And I do believe you can lead from the bench. I do believe that you can be just an equal part of the team if you're the manager or the water boy or girl or the train, like all of those roles are important. So I feel like the benefits for women are innumerable. And, when I was at Colgate, we ended up filing a suit. I was one of 5 plaintiffs. We were on a club hockey team and we were very good. And we had an excellent Division I varsity men's team. And so this club hockey team for years was like, hey, we want equal status, like long before I was there. And they were like, no, we want to, no. And so eventually when I came in as a freshman, there was another freshman and I were tapped on the shoulder by one of our seniors, Jenny Cook. And she said, we're filing a suit against the school under Title IX to get equal access basically, and to have equipment and ice time and like all the kind of basics that you'd want. And so we were like, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, we'll be on it. Whatever, man. Yeah, sure, Jenny, and little by little, like we got called in to be deposed, and like suddenly you realize, oh wait, we're part of something here. And then we won. We won our senior year, Julie and my senior year. And then because we were graduating, they appealed. Because why? They appealed and then we lost. And then what we did is we tapped the next generation of players. And then that was the group that actually won. And for me, some of the kind of things that I'm most proud of is like, I didn't even realize at the time that was such a big deal. But I think about the generations of players or the like dozens and dozens and dozens of players through these teams throughout the years since I have graduated. And since that has become a real like varsity national, like they're in the final Frozen Four all the time. Like to me, that makes me incredibly proud that I was a part of that and that I was around other women and kind of shown the light by other women to say, there's a way that you can stand up for yourself. And so the fact that came through sport was not only a way for me to go have fun with some teammates and skate and be really good at hockey, which by the way, I was like not one of the best on the team, but they kind of kept me showing up for some reason. But, it was more about like, it gave us the courage to go try new things and to try to defend our piece of real estate, if you will, and to not have to like do a brownie sale to pay the Zamboni guy. Like, come on, So for me, it's everything. It's, sports has taught incredible mental leadership.
I'm getting 2 big lessons from this. First of all, Emily in Paris, what? It's there in Dijon. Let's just
much less fashionable.
I mean, debatable considering some of the big brands that you've worked with, right? And before Christy started talking, I was just going to say, like, let's continue this interview in French, but I'm not going to go there. And the other lesson that I'm getting is that it started with your mom, and maybe your mom had a role model, right? But you're passing on that legacy one generation at a time, and it's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I do have an awesome daughter. Did I tell you? I didn't tell you guys about the story about my daughter.
No.
She is, her name is Coco, or Cosette, but we call her Coco. And so my boys play soccer and they're, pretty good at it. And so she also played soccer and she was not as good as the boys. And so we sat her down one day and said, you don't have to do this. You don't have to play soccer. Like, we just want you to be active. We don't care what you do. We don't even care if it's competitive. Like, just do something. So she said, I think I want to dance, which as a stick and ball mom was a little bit shocking. She's actually quite good at dance and she's quite good at hip hop. But then one day when she first started in high school, she said, I want to start a flag, or I want to play flag football. But they don't have flag football. And I said, well, just go ask the AD if you can start a club. Like, how hard can this be? And she was like, okay. And so she went up to the AD at, 14 years old or whatever she was and said, hi, I'm, a new freshman here and I don't see a flag football club. I'd like to start a club. And he was basically like, yeah, we can't do that because then we'd have to start a boys club and we can't do that. I think it was probably because of funding and, all the things. It's a public school. So she came home, she was quite dejected. And I, through my work here at Wasserman, knew that the NFL was highly engaged in flag football through like the Bears and other teams because we were working with them overseas. And so I said, well, why don't we try to call the Panthers and see if they do anything with flag football? And, because I hear that there's some stuff going on. So we reached out randomly to a guy named Riley Fields, who's their community director. And Riley called us back and could not have been more excited that he had somebody that was interested in starting flag football in our county because they'd been trying for like 12 months to get somebody to pay attention in our county. And here we were, like the spark that might light the match, basically. And so fast forward, and the Panthers were willing to give money, resources, equipment, all the things. So it wasn't a matter of like funding at that point. It was a matter of, do we have the space? Do we have the teams we can play? We were like, we'll go rent the fields. We can go find the teams through our friends and, Snap and all this. And just as we were kind of getting to that point, the AD came back and said, hold on, there's a bigger conversation now. Like, this has lit the fire around the county. And there's a bigger conversation. And sure enough, fast forward 18 months, an entire league has been started, 25 teams, crazy. They went to the Super Bowl twice, lost both times, but this is our year. And yeah, and it was like in Coco, they announced this thing in Raleigh and they brought out the tunnel and Sir Purr from the Panthers and all the press were there and they gave her this jersey. I was so proud of her. Yeah, it was really cool. So it's a big joke in our family that I say, boys, you were like hotshot soccer players here at Apex High School, but really it's your sister's jersey that actually hangs on the wall. So, so we're trying to pass it down.
That is so interesting. You're the third conversation that I have this week about girls wanting to start a flag football team and getting pushback from their schools because it's becoming more and more popular. And yeah. I remember I grew up in France and my sport was soccer and has always been soccer, except that my parents did not believe in a girl playing on a boys team because there were no girls team at that point in time when I was growing up. And so I was pushed into tennis, which I ended up loving, played for 17 years, loved the Billie Jean King poster that you have behind you. And I'm also a big basketball fan, so the Brittany Griner reference as well is nice. But yeah, it's amazing to see that a lot of those sports that were considered at once upon a time a boys' sport are now being normalized for girls because girls can do it just as well, if not better.
Yeah, or even differently, and that's great too. And that's just wildly appropriate because we don't have to be judged the same on everything. But yeah, it's been so fun, and from that, she's really learned an enormous amount about leadership and perseverance and how money flows. That's a big lesson in business for her.
How do you see it evolving over time and in the future? How do you see this collective approach to women's sports? And I was just texting Christy as you were talking. I'm like, man, I wish I would have worn my everyone watches women's sports t-shirt because it is a movement. And I think it started before Caitlin Clark. I think it started probably 5-6 years before Caitlin Clark became a phenomenon.
Yeah.
But what do you see the future for all women's sports?
Well, wouldn't that be the fun crystal ball, Aggie? I believe that women's sports have proven themselves to be watchable, to be interesting, to be events worth attending, jerseys worth buying, sports worth watching, sponsorable, all of those things. Now, I think we actually have to begin to figure out how to up level that. In my mind, if Deloitte came out and said the entire women's sports ecosystem is $2.35 billion in revenue this year, 2025. Okay. The entire ecosystem is something like $540 billion. So we've got some room to go and grow. And so I don't want to poo-poo all the work that's been done because last year was 1.8, right? So like there's growth and we should be excited and applauding and all of that. And now there's tons of private equity coming in and venture capital and investment firms that are coming in and saying, okay, we're leaning in. We see the return. We see it and we're putting our money in. A lot of those venture-backed entities are men who are now coming in to run women's sports. And that's okay, as long as there's this continued feeling of community, collaboration, this ability to think about the future differently, think about how to innovate differently. You know, the thing with women's sports is that they've had to be scrappy to survive. They've had to innovate to survive. They've had to lead in ways that men's sports haven't needed to, but also probably couldn't have because there's almost like too big to fail. Not too big to fail, but they don't have as much room to try and fail because their world is just so big. So I think there's a lot of room for us to continue to grow. Now that depends sport by sport. It's really fun right now to watch so many nascent sports come in terms of like new frameworks and models with Unrivaled to Athletes Unlimited to many different volleyball leagues and like what's going to happen there. So there's like intrigue and drama and so much good competition on the courts and, you know, internationally, it's really interesting. I've traveled all over the world and really spent some time thinking about and getting to know different people in different markets and watching sports in different markets. And it's like really fun to see what we can learn here in the US and like how that actually can be applied to other markets and how other markets may not necessarily be as advanced in structural things, but they are very thoughtful about and much more kind of solidified in the youth to professional lens. So there's a lot to kind of encapsulate and take into that question, but I think the future is bright. And I agree, it did not start with Caitlin Clark. She is just ask the many, many decades of women who have toiled in that, you know, basketball space before her.
What can we do as women on an individual level to continue to champion this movement?
I think it's many things. I think it's encourage the young girls in your orbit, whether those are daughters, neighbors, kids, nieces, whatever, to continue to just be active first and foremost. It doesn't matter if they're competitive, just move and learn how that mind-body connection works. And then if you're able to be competitive, that's great because you learn a lot of great lessons in failing and in losing and in winning and in being part of a team and in not being the best and in being the best and in being coachable and not coachable and all of the things that go through your life as you're an athlete and as you move through that journey. I think to be able to support each other through that is important. It's an interesting moment, I think, because I look at Coco and her friends in dance, and I think this generation, Gen Z, they're very collaborative and supportive of each other. Where I, as a Gen X, we were set up to think that there was only one spot on the roster, or there was only a certain, like, you didn't actually encourage your competition. You weren't friends with your competition. And I find it's so refreshing to be able to say, actually, we will all go further if we are in support of each other, even if I don't necessarily love the way that you're doing it. I love that you are doing it. And that's something that I think we can all hold ourselves accountable to, is to show up for each other and celebrate each other, even though it might be like, well, that lady drives me crazy, or I don't necessarily agree with that way of doing the business. But if they're making a difference for women, then let them go team. And then I would say, from a personal level, like buy the tickets, buy the jersey, get them for your, dads and brothers and husbands and sons, like tell more people about it, basically advocate, evangelize. There's a lot that we need to continue to get out there.
So true. I think overall, Justin, and you said it, I think it reminded me of I think it was Megyn Kelly's biography where she was talking about the Katie Couric era of journalism where it was eat or be eaten, basically, of no one was friends with their colleagues, because if you were a rising star, then the one who was the star thought, well, you're going for my job. There is no room for the two of us. And
that's right.
And I think that there has been a shift in mindset in women in general. And Christy, see it because we essentially do what you do, but for women-owned businesses. That's who we champion. That's who we take under our wing and really co-lead with them to help them understand that growth happens through partnership and collaboration. It's not the you eat or be eaten approach anymore, because that's gone. And if we don't all congregate together, it's never going to work out.
It's also exhausting. The energy is exhausting when it's, the women's sports industry is very collaborative. It just is. And the expectation, and particularly the sports industry as a whole here in the US, but there's an expectation that you're just going to, appreciate each other and be on board. And so when those people that come into it are not, everybody's like, what is going on here? Who even are you? Who invited this person? So yeah, the sky's the limit, I think.
Amazing. So if you were to leave our listeners with, maybe not go to school to study religion, because I'm not sure you've used that part of your brain since you've talked about it.
Only when I'm up against the deadline, yeah.
What if you were to leave our listeners with the biggest lesson you've ever learned throughout your incredible journey through, going and knocking on ABC's door, going to a country that is not your birth country, taking chances, changing industries, shifting your brain, being the ideas person, like what would be that piece of advice?
Ooh, gosh, I would say a couple of things. One is the faster you can learn what your particular gift is, the faster you can run to wherever it is you should be. I didn't understand what my gift was, and my sweet spot is creating within structure. And that's how I am an artist. I am an artist that can come up with something and then tether it very quickly. Other people have other gifts. I am always jealous of the people who are like, I've always known I've wanted to be a musician. And I'm like, really? Gosh, I've always wanted to have that clarity. I just don't. And so I think it's okay to not have that clarity. So I think the faster you can hone in on that, the better your life will be, because then you'll really be able to say, no, that's not for me. Like, no, insurance is not for me. Yes, I can tell that I'm getting something from working at Outback Steakhouse and being around other people. That's a light bulb for me, right? So the more you can collect those light bulbs, the better. And then I say this to this cohort that we work with a lot, which is like permission granted. By the way, as a woman, permission granted to say no, to change your mind, to change your course, to change careers, to decide that you do want to go back to work, to decide you don't want to go back to work, to decide that you want to have that promotion and you're going to go for it, or you don't want to have that promotion and you're perfectly fine where you are, or that I want to have more ambition this year than I did last year, or I don't want to. Like, permission granted. Done. Fairy godmother has come in literally to tell you permission granted. We've made them desk plaques because it's so important for us as women to allow ourselves the room to make decisions for us individually. And that's okay. It's our own individual journey. And like, the world is not going to topple over because we've decided something different. It just won't.
Thayer, I do not want to ruin that last piece of beautiful advice. And so with that, I'm going to graciously say thank you so much for sharing your journey, your wisdom, and the inspiration for not only the younger generations, but for some of us that maybe just didn't have that guide or lead along the way to show us that we have the permission granted.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you for echoing that and sharing it and just being completely authentic today, sharing your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. On that note, stay badass, ladies. thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Christy and Aggie.